So we're going to begin. Welcome, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm going to begin with a little recap, a recap of how the politics of the Megillah plays out from the beginning till now. And we're up to chapter 5 in the Megillah. And it's really the critical chapter. Five, we're going to do 5 and 6 today. But I'd like to begin with how the politics works and what each chapter was supposed to accomplish. Chapter 1 is giving us really the background, how the Persian government works. We see Ahasuerus' weakness and his need to show his power by having parties. That means that we see that he's really weak and he needs to show off his wealth and his control because he's really out of control. And we also see an important thing is that he has many people, many advisors helping him make his decisions. When many advisors help you make the decisions, so then actually the king really has more of the authority because the king has to decide between competing voices. And they end up coming up with a pretty benign and even farcical decision concerning Vashti. We also see Vashti, who is a woman in the Persian Empire, pretty weak, but she is able to use her power to humiliate Ahasuerus, and she is aware of that, and she capitalizes on it. But her power is short-lived because the direct confrontation that she has ends up turning her into a powerless situation. In chapter 2, we see Ahasuerus calling in all the women. What we have basically here is institutionalized rape. It's really reducing women, not only does the proclamation reduce women that they have to honor their husbands, but this worldwide call for all the virgins to come in, have one night of relations with the king, and then be forever husbandless is actually a terrible thing for any woman to get caught up in. Esther is caught up in this, and she finds a way to find favor, and she is put in a position of tremendous connection to Ahasuerus, but also no power. At the end of chapter 2, we have the Bigtan Teresh, which is such an interesting, seemingly sidebar in the story, but it is the catalyst for the change that Ahasuerus carries out. Ahasuerus realizes that two of his bodyguards are out to kill him, and Mordechai informs Esther, who informs Ahasuerus, and then it gets written in Ahasuerus's in Mordechai's name. However, because of this, Ahasuerus changes his whole system. He brings up a man we didn't hear about before. He brings up a man, Haman. We have 18 people listed before. 18, so many. Haman is not in any of those lists. And he's the one that's brought up. He's the one that's put the power. Ahasuerus said, I don't want to rely on so many people, give so many people power. I'm going to take one trusted person and put him in power. And that's what he does. And from that on, he doesn't have to worry about anything. Now, a big question is over here, we raised this part last week. Why doesn't he put Mordechai in power? No, but it is a question. Now, the problem is when you have a one-person rule, the problem is that he can decide anything, and that's what we see. Mordechai's refusal to bow down. This is a big question, and it's almost criminal. He puts the whole Jewish people in danger. And we answered this question last week. Why did Mordechai refuse to bow down? And the Hachamim say that Haman wore avodah zarah on his shirt, on his clothing, around his neck. But when we think about it, Mordechai is politically astute. Mordechai sees what's going on. He sees Haman raised to a position of power. He knows who Ahasuerus is. He knows his weakness. And he sees the balance of power is shifting from Hashverosh. Hashverosh become weaker and weaker until Haman eventually takes over. If Haman takes over, that's it. Mordechai's ace in the hole, his trump card that he's holding of having Esther is worth nothing. And the more time that Mordechai waits, the less power Ahasuerus will have. Ahasuerus still has power, and Mordechai decides to precipitate the conflict early because as time goes on, he's going to lose his whatever power that he has, and that's why Mordechai, in my opinion, Mordechai decides to open up the conflict and to let Haman know that he's a Jew, and he lets it know that he's a Jew, and Haman reacts, trying to nip any insurrection in the bud immediately, and he puts down. He says no, he's not going to kill only Mordechai, but all the Jewish people, and this is calculated by Mordechai. He didn't know where it would end up, but he knew that he had to play. His best shot was still when Ahasuerus had power from this usurper from Haman, who was going to eventually gain more and more power as time went on. We know that Haman was power hungry because he's the one that made Ahasuerus. He's the one that made Ahasuerus force everyone to bow down to him, which would never happen before. So it's a gutsy, risky, political and strategic move that Mordechai does, and we see that at first it causes a lot of problems, and we get to chapter 4. Chapter 4 is a critical chapter where Mordechai decides to go public and do something that is against. He has basically a protest rally of one, but something very apparent that he violates the court etiquette. He tries to go into the court with wearing sackcloth, wearing mourning cloth, and the whole city of Shushan, the Jews in the city of Shushan are in an uproar, and he is actually causing a kind of opposition, whatever could be done in such a situation. Esther knows nothing about what's happening to the Jews. Remember, this is now 7 years after she was put into power. And the whole city, all the Jews in all the world, in all the 127 nations, know what's happening. Esther doesn't. She's concerned about court etiquette, and there's always a danger with the court Jew that he might become completely assimilated. Esther was on that danger. Mordechai convinces her to act, gets angry at her, and she decides to act. And that's where we'll pick up the story now. I just want to mention one point that Moe brought up last week. Thank you, Moe. It's a very, very good point. Moe pointed out a backstory that's going on over here. There's definitely there. We have Haman is from Agag, Agagi. And Haman being from Agag was the king of Amalek. And we have Mordechai, even though it's called Mordechai Yehudi, he's from the tribe of Binyamin, which is and from the same family as Shaul HaMelech was, Kish. And here you have a kind of tikkun going on. We're back to, it's like a rematch between Amalek and Shaul, and there's definitely that undercurrent going on. Anyone who's familiar with the Tanakh and Megillat Esther is assuming a familiarity with the Tanakh. We know that. Anyone who's familiar with the Tanakh has to marvel at, here we go again. We have Amalek and Shaul's descendant, or Kish's descendant, the family of Binyamin, going at one another. Moe, thank you for that point. I definitely think that there's something to it. Okay, let's go to the chapter 5, and we're going to analyze chapter 5 and 6 today. And let me one second, sorry. I'm going to share my screen. Just you should have the text in front of you. So now we're Esther decides to have a fasting. She tells Mordechai, go assemble all the Jews. This is the end of chapter 4. Live in Shushan, fast. Why have to not eat or drink for 3 days, night and day? We said this is Pesach time, right? This is Pesach time, so it means that there's no seder that year. I and my maidens will observe the same fast. Then I shall go to the king. Though it's contrary to the law, and if I'm to perish, I shall perish. And Mordechai went, and he brings that. Now, Esther is fasting 3 days. Think of ourselves at the end of one day of Yom Kippur. Okay, now you go. Instead of eating that the samusak at the end of Kippur and having a drink of oranges, a coffee, or whatever, water, you go another day, and then another day. Esther did that as well, and she comes to the king in a situation that she had to be looking very gaunt and pale and weak. And it's the third day. She puts on her whatever she is as a queen, her royal apparel, and she comes to the king's palace, and the king sees her and puts out the scepter, and she's accepted it. Now the king looks at her, had to notice her situation, and had to notice that she's weak and gaunt and risking her life. Why would the queen? So the king definitely has, Hashos definitely has a big question in his mind. What is going on over here? And as any husband any loving husband to his wife sees his wife in such a situation, and she was his wife, and even though he had many concubines, and she was his chosen one, and she's definitely the queen. So he wants to show his magnanimousness, and he even overstates the case to the half of the kingdom, whatever you want. And Esther says a statement that has in it a little bit of ambiguity. If it please your majesty, that your majesty and Haman come today to the feast that I have prepared for him. That word for him is something that is not clear. And it's putting in Achashverosh's mind, possibly, it could be understood either way. For the king, she's speaking to the king in third person, or she is speaking about Haman. Now, let's take a second and think about Esther's position. What are the options that she has? What can she do? Number one, she's a woman. Number two, she knows nothing about the affairs of state. Number three, Ahasuerus knows nothing about the affairs of state. She is told by Mordechai to go and to make the case in front of the king, right? Mordechai tells her to go and save the people, and seemingly she should just go in and put the cards on the table, and that's it, and ask for it. But she knows that way is doomed to failure. So Mordechai tells her to go and save the Jews, and she decides to save them in her own way. So what is her own way? She knows she can't argue policy with Haman. I mean, the king had promoted Haman to the point of being the only one he relies upon. So what does Esther know about policy? But she decides that direct confrontation is not going to work. How does she know that? She knows, first of all, Vashti tried to use whatever power she had, and it didn't work. Hashos is not going to listen to her. He doesn't care about what's going on in the country, and he doesn't want to lose face with Haman. Esther probably did an analysis of what are her assets. How could she get this accomplished? And she realized the strongest asset is a connection with Ahasuerus. Another asset is she knows she's Jewish, and no one else does, so it's knowledge that she has to see how to use. She knows that Hashverosh loves a party, and she knows a weakness in Haman, that he's very, very haughty, very big Baal Gava, and she makes a decision to drive a wedge between Haman and Hashverosh using her leverage. And in one thing, she is closer than Haman to the king, and that is in the relationship. And that's what she uses. So the king is still in power, and he's able to command Haman to go, tell Haman to hurry and do Esther's bidding. So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared, and the trap is beginning to be set for Haman. Now, I'm going back to the shared screen. So now they're in the middle of the party, the feast that she has, and the king is still troubled. What does Esther want? She makes this, risks her life. She's coming to be gaunt, pale, dressed up, but still pale and still weak to have a party. What does she want? And she decides, she sees the situation, and it's a question in my mind whether she planned this out from the beginning or whether she saw that it wasn't right yet to spring the trap. I think that she made a call at the moment that it was not yet the appropriate, and the time was not yet on her side, or she was not yet the right time to spring the trap. And I think she made the call right then and there that she was going to bide her time a little bit and increase attention for the king, increase the suspense, and it makes the final decision by Esther, the final revelation by Esther, that much more powerful. And
I have a question at this juncture. I just noticing that by delaying and making another party the next day and finally revealing that she's Jewish the next day, that'd be the fourth day from when she started fasting, and perhaps she wasn't fasting anymore by that day.
I would imagine she ate at the feast. I mean, I would imagine she joined them in the eating.
So probably. Even in the first party, that was the end of her
I think,
fast.
I think that it would be likely that she was eating with them and drinking with them and
but if her appearance was meant to be part of her strategy, and she's clearly had been fasting, so the next day that I guess it wouldn't be present.
Yeah, we don't.
For better or for worse.
She was eating, but I'm assuming she was eating at the feast. The unusual that if she were not.
Right.
We don't know what was going on there, and what they probably was talking, and the king loves a party, and Haman was pretty gratified that the queen called him, and which is probably a question mark in his mind, what's going on here. Haman is used to people fawning over him now, and that he was the only one in power, but the queen, and it's something in his mind also, and he says it later. Now look at Esther's words as she responds. In the middle of the feast, right? The king asks Esther, "What is your wish? Shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to half the kingdom." Like he repeats it, right? What is your wish? What is your request? He's very magnanimous and very, very loving to the queen, and wanting to take her out of her, difficult situation, whatever it is. And Esther is hesitant here. My wish, replied Esther, my request, if your majesty will do me the favor, if it please your majesty. How many times how many introductions is she putting to this request? I'm reading the Hebrew over here. ותאמר אסתר, אם על המלך טוב, sorry, ותען אסתר ותאמר, שאלתי ובקשתי, אם מצאתי חן בעיני המלך, אם על המלך טוב, לתת את שאלתי ולעשות את בקשתי, all these introductory words, it's a hesitance. Now, it could be very, very wily on Esther's part that she, she's like, if you can picture the king, like she's like, yeah, what do you want? What do you want already? But say it. Just say, and she's building up, and he's waiting to hear that this is, and she doesn't tell him. It's very, very sharp. I mean, it could be that she just doesn't, she's hesitant, or it could be she's just building the tension in the king's mind to have something resolved. And she does it, I think, masterfully, I think, to bring the king to this point. And she says, Yavo HaMelech veHaman, el HaMishte asher e'aseh lahem, u'machar e'aseh b'dvar kidvar HaMelech. But she can't leave him in suspense so long. And she doesn't want to play him so much, and she does say that tomorrow I will finally tell the king what I want. So there is something behind the whole thing. She lets the king know, but she is not going to let him know until, and the suspense for the king is killing him, is really bothering him. But we get to that in a minute. Before that, we have a little bit of a very interesting interlude. Haman walks out. That day, Haman went out happy and lighthearted. Picture the man. But when Haman saw Mordechai in the palace gate, and Mordechai did not rise or even stir on his account, Haman was filled with rage at him. Now, Mordechai's a dead man walking. Mordechai is slated, along with all the Jewish people, for assassination. What bothers Haman so much? Why does he get so angry at Mordechai? And we see Haman doesn't do anything at that moment. Apparently, he doesn't have the power to kill on sight yet, but he has to get the king's permission for that. And Mordechai is a type of opposition. He is rousing up the Jews and making a public scene about what's going on, about the decree. And remember, we're only 3 or 4 days after the decree went out. Well, maybe it's Pesach, it's the week, it's right, it's a couple of weeks, maybe maximum, it could be a couple of days. Yet Haman is disturbed about this, and he goes in, and we have this little conversation with his wife and his advisors, and this is so telling. Look at verse 12. What is more, said Haman, the Queen Esther gave a feast, and besides the king, she did not have anyone but me, and tomorrow too I am invited by her along with the king. Yet all this means nothing to me, nothing. Every time I see that the Jew Mordechai sitting in the palace gate and sitting and not bowing, right? But even just seeing him is enough to get Haman's anger complete, and it's all worth nothing. It's all worth nothing to him. What's going on over here? Well, this could be the act of a megalomaniac who at the base is very, very, very suspicious of anyone wresting any control from him. He cannot allow even one chink of the armor. It could be 11 months is a long time away, and who knows what will happen. And it could be that this is a Jew hater, Sorera Yehudim, from the outset. Maybe if he's a descendant of Amalek, part of that, and he knows what Shaul did with Agag, take the idea that this is a continuation of the historical conflict. It could be that this is continuing. I have to make a side point over here. There is, and I brought this up last week or 2 weeks ago, there is an opinion that says that Haman and Mordechai knew each other from back in Jerusalem when Mordechai was of the people that returned to Jerusalem, and Haman was one of the people that stopped the building of the Beit HaMikdash. There's an opinion like that. I read an article like this maybe 30 years ago, and it's an interesting opinion. It could be going on over here that Mordechai knows who Haman is, and Haman knows who Mordechai is, and they're old enemies and old rivals. However, I don't want to take that approach over here. It's not in any way hinted, well, maybe a little bit hinted in the text, but with the idea of Sorera Yehudim. But I'd like to not take that position. I'd like to take the position of the things that are happening over here are happening because Haman sees even the smallest chink in his armor as a major problem, and all is for naught, all is worth nothing if Mordechai is going to flout his leadership. So Haman asks the advice of his wife and his friends, and let a stake be put up 50 cubits high, and in the morning asks the king to have Mordecai impaled upon it. Then you can go gaily with the king to the feast. The proposal pleased Haman, and he had the stake put up. I'd like to just think about what it means 50 cubits high, because we don't usually go by cubits. 50 cubits is 75 feet. We're talking about a 5 or 6 story building. And it's one gigantic pole, up 6 stories. You think about it, and it was a gallows, right? And they're going to impale someone on that or hang someone on that. And it definitely aroused suspicion. And it definitely was noticeable that this Haman was doing something like this and having this thing called, and it was in sight of the palace, inside of where the king was. You know that from in the couple of chapters, the end of the end of 2 chapters from there. So the end of the next chapter. So here you have Haman doing something very blatant. He doesn't say, let me kill the king, let me kill Mordechai in a silent way, let me execute him. 50 cubits high, he is making a point by this stake. He is making a point he wants to quell any opposition to his power, anyone who's not going to bow down, and everyone knew that Mordechai was not going to bow down. He was going to finish it off completely. And this is Haman's what's going on with Haman, and Haman is so satisfied with himself, sure of himself that this is going to happen. Going to the next chapter now. Sorry, I think okay. I messed up the text. Sorry. I think I skipped the pasuk. The pasuk is the pasuk that we read out loud, right? And the pasuk is Balayla hu nalida shanat hamelech. So the king's sleep was troubled, and the king's sleep was troubled. What was troubling the king's sleep? We have no way of knowing, but it could be all the things that Esther put in his mind. It could be that, as Esther planted something in his mind, there's something going on with Haman. What does Esther want? Why is she inviting only Haman? And in fact, the second time she invites, it's clear that she made the feast for them. We didn't mention this point before, but she says, "Yavo Amelech v'Haman el hamishtea asher e'aseh lahem." So it wasn't just Haman as a kind of tag along. The feast is for Haman. Why did she say that? Why is she making a feast for her husband, the king, and for Haman? So this could have been going through the king's head. He could be a little bit suspicious of Haman himself. And he starts to rethink, why, was I right in putting Haman into power? There was an attempt on my life. And why did I promote Haman? That could be going through his head. And therefore he asked for the Chronicles book. It's not just, read me something boring so I'll go to sleep. I need to know what Haman did, or do I have anyone else I could trust? Maybe he wants to take Haman down a notch. Right? It's not just like my wife sometimes tell me, tell me a class I could fall asleep at. No, there's a point to it. Ahasuerus is questioning his whole elevation of Haman, and did Haman ever do anything good for him? And sure enough, he finds out that he does have another trusted courtier, and that is Mordecai. And this is he asks, was anything done? And במצא כתוב, and it's found written, אשר הגיד מרדכי על בקטנה ותרש שני סריסי המלך ושומרי הסף, אשר לשלוח יד במלך אשור. He finds that Mordecai informed about the attempt on his life. Ahasuerus has two major things that go on in his life. His wife Vashti was taken from him in a fit of drunken rage, and his life was attempted. An attempt on his life was made. Mordecai saved him from that. And then, of course, Ahasuerus wants to know, well, did Mordecai get anything for this? Yeah, maybe he's even thinking already then at taking Haman down a notch. ויאמר המלך, מה נעשה יקר גדולה למרדכי הזה? What was done for Mordecai? And the king's advisors tell him, לא נעשה עמו דבר. Now, why does this bother Ahasuerus? It could be that what's going on over here is that Ahasuerus is thinking, I was wrong to put up Haman. Maybe it should have been Mordecai, but this whole thing gets cut short because there's someone in the courtyard. Haman, the king hears Haman in the courtyard, and it's who is in the court? The king asks, and Haman just entered the outer court of the royal palace. It's the middle of the night to speak to the king about having Mordecai impaled on the stake that he had prepared for him. So Haman in the court. The king's servants answered, "Let him enter," said the king, and Haman entered. Now, this question to Haman. Number one, Haman is his trusted advisor, but maybe not so trusted at this point. And it could be that he's throwing something to Haman as a test. It could be the king who still has power. Haman still has to request the execution of Mordecai from him. It could be that the king is testing Haman. And because he doesn't put things out right to him. He doesn't say, Mordecai did this thing and we have to give him something. What should we give him? It's not that kind of a consultation. It's not a very clear consultation. It's a hidden consultation. And it could be that Ahasuerus and all his boorishness and foolishness and it could be that he has some moments of lucidity. But I think that especially when it comes to it comes to someone close to him trying to usurp power, and he gave him, but within limits. And I think that Achashverosh does want to test Haman in this way. Now, Haman can't control himself. Uh, Haman is a Baal Gava. Clearly, he is the strongest person in the superpower of Parashu Madai. Although he doesn't have the authority of the king, he's the one that decides everything. He has the king's ring. So, of course, he was to think in his megalomania that the king would want to honor him. So now that he's thinking that the king wants to honor him, he, of course, uh, puts it out there what he's thinking. He wants to replace the king. He doesn't say it outright, but in his answer, it's clear that he wants to take everything that the king wears and become the king, and that becomes clear to the king as well. You don't have the text is in front of you. You can read it. He says, "Give me the clothing, give me the horse, have the person run. The king wants to honor." This is the exact thing that Ahasuerus just had to hear in order to solidify in his mind that this man is up to no good. And I think it's clear to Ahasuerus when he pulls the rug out from under Haman by saying, "Do everything that you just said and do it to Mordechai." And I think that he knows he's sticking it to Haman. He's taking him down a notch because he tells him, it should be unnecessarily to tell him, but he tells him like this: "Vayomer Amelech leHaman, Maher kach et halevush, quickly take the clothing, take the horse, like you said, kasher dibarta, v'asechem leMordechai HaYehudi, do it to Mordechai the Jew, Hayoshev b'shar HaMelech." In case you didn't know, he's the one Hayoshev b'shar HaMelech. He doesn't bow down to you. In fact, that's the word that Haman used before. He didn't say Haman is a bow down. He said Haman Yoshev. So take the one who's Yoshev, the one who's not bowing down to you, the one who's sitting here, do it to that guy. And then he adds the phrase, Al tapel davar mikol asher divarta. Now, why would the king think that Haman would not do exactly what he said? The king is definitely sticking to Haman. The king is out. He's out to take Haman down a notch. The king he said, don't let one thing fall from what you said. These extra words, and the Mordechai HaYehudi Hayoshev b'shar HaMelech, in my mind, here you have the king asserting his power, taking down Haman a notch. He said he's getting too big for his own head. I forgot the phrase in English. Too big for your britches, I think it is. And here he's taking down Haman a notch, and in his mind he's already thinking, what is this Haman guy up to? And Haman does it. He does what the king said, obviously, and he does exactly what. Verse 12, you have the text in front of you. So Haman took the garb and the horse, and he took Mordechai, made it to the city. This is what the king does for the man of king. And Mordechai returned to the king's gate, while Haman hurried home, his head covered in mourning. He was just taken down a notch, and he knows it. He was just defeated by his main rival, by his nemesis, by Mordechai. And Mordechai doesn't make too much of it. He goes back to where he was. He's back to his position of opposition to the king, back to his sackcloth. And Haman tells Zeresh, and they predict his downfall. They see this as a major turning point, and they tell him if Mordechai is from the Jews, you won't defeat him. You will fall before him to your ruin. And in the midst of that prophecy, in the midst of that prediction, Haman is rushed to his end. He's rushed to the next feast that Esther does, and here we have the denouement of the story coming. It's one of the most exciting and I think dramatic turns that happened in all of the biblical literature. It's I mean, it feels great when you read it to see an enemy of the Jews falling down to this degree. So let's dive into this the next chapter of 1 second, sorry. So we're in chapter oh this is the end of the chapter, sorry. So just we'll do chapter 7 next week, Bezrat Hashem. We see over here the genius of Esther in setting up the situation. We see Esther pulling out, using the power that she has strategically to she's seemingly powerless, but she's aware of the power that she has to set up Haman's downfall. Next week we'll go into the tremendous change that happens in chapter 7, into the denouement of the story, and we're going to also answer the question: what is Harbonah doing? He was mentioned before. What is his role, and why does he come at this point come forward? And we'll also speak about Haman and why how the king reasserts his power. So Esther makes the king jealous, using the wedge of driving a wedge between Haman and between the king. And this next week at this time we'll go to the chapter 7. If there are any questions or anyone want to comment, please feel free.
I do have a question.
Please go ahead.
Just paying attention to what Ahasuerus tells Haman, he's clearly aware that Mordechai is a Yehudi, because he says Mordechai a Yehudi. So that makes me suspect that when Haman said there is Yeshno Am Echad Mefuzar Forad, and Ahasuerus gives permission to destroy that nation, that Ahasuerus didn't know which nation Haman was talking about, and even though messages were sent throughout the entire kingdom, perhaps he didn't know, because if he did, how did he not realize right away the tension between the fact that a Jew saved his life, but on the other hand, he's giving permission to destroy all of the Jews?
He doesn't know which nation is being spoken about. I don't think he read the proclamation.
Right. Okay.
And
I find it.
And Haman didn't tell him. Haman didn't mention the name of the Jews.
Right. Even the rest of the kingdom knows, but Ahasuerus doesn't.
Hard to believe.
Right.
Esther doesn't either, by the way. Because
right.
Esther, Esther,
like they're in their own world.
The palace is its own world, apparently. And,
right.
And the question that's going through my mind: did Ahasuerus know I was assuming that Ahasuerus knew the animosity that existed between Haman and Mordechai. I was assuming that because, or maybe he does. Maybe Ahasuerus does know that because it's in the court that's going on, and maybe he does know that Mordechai is not bowing down to him, to Haman.
If he put 2 and 2 together, he could have figured out who would Haman, of all nations, want to destroy, if he knows that Mordechai angered him.
But Haman doesn't ever mention the personal aspect to it. Just like Ahasuerus nationalized a personal problem. Haman with the Vashti. So Haman does the same thing. He nationalizes a personal peccadillo that he has with Mordechai, and doesn't even mention. That doesn't get mentioned to as the reason. The reasons are highfalutin, highfalutin reasons, and the nation doesn't follow. It follows its own laws and doesn't follow the laws of the king. And nothing. And you have to say Ahasuerus was probably not the sharpest tack in the box either. He's not all there, and that's why the surprising suspicion of Haman is that's why it's so surprising. Okay, thank you very much.